Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am diving into the world of storytelling by exploring how subplots can transform your narrative. Whether you are a seasoned author or just starting out, understanding the power of subplots can take your narrative and your storytelling to a whole nother level. In this video, I'm going to give you the benefits of using subplots in your narrative, a few of the different types of subplots, not all of them, but a few of them to kind of get your creative juices flowing. And then I'm going to give you practical tips on how you can apply subplots to your story. Imagine you are watching your favorite movie or TV show or reading your favorite book. What keeps you invested and engaged with the story? Sure, the main plot is important, but it's the subplots that add depth and complexity and keep us engaged. Subplots can introduce new characters, new themes, they can introduce new conflict or resolutions, and what these subplots do is they add to and make the main plot so much more. You may be wondering, what is a subplot? Well, a subplot is a storyline that runs parallel to the main plot. You have your main plot, and then you have subplots that intersect with the main plot. You're going to have one main plot line, but you can have multiple subplots. And by weaving multiple subplots into the main plot line, you're going to add complexity and depth, and it really helps engage the reader when there are subplots that weave in and out of the main plot line. I'm going to share 3 benefits. There's lots of benefits, but I'm going to share the 3 that I like the best about using subplots in your narrative. The first benefit is character development. You can use subplots to really dig deep with your character, to reveal different aspects of your character. By having them interact with different people and having these different things happen to your character and around your character, you're able to give backstory and motivation and things that make the character a really relatable and well-rounded character. You can use subplots to do that. Benefit number 2 is conflict and tension. By weaving subplots into your story, you can increase the tension and the pacing of your story. And by adding it, especially in the midpoint of your story where it sometimes lags and new authors sometimes struggle with what happens in the midpoint, by adding those subplots, it helps propel the story forward by adding and introducing new conflicts and new levels of tension for the story. Benefit number 3 is theme exploration. So you can use subplots to really explore different themes in your story. There are many different types of subplots, but I am going to focus on 4 different types of subplots to kind of get your creative juices flowing and get you thinking about the possibilities of subplots in your story. The first subplot is a mirror subplot. And this is when you have a conflict or an interaction that happens that runs parallel to the main plot, and it parallels the conflict of the main character, the main storyline, it parallels it. And you can see this in an example of a rom-com. A lot of rom-coms use parallel subplots. And so in the case of a rom-com, it would be like you have the main character who's this lady who's looking for love, and her best friend is looking for love as well. And you follow the story of both of these characters falling in love, and what happens to her best friend. She may not have, something bad may happen, and there's something that the main character learns from watching her best friend go through a similar struggle. One of the key things to keep in mind with a mirror subplot is that the subplot is mirroring what the main character is going through, and there's a lesson. There's something that the main character needs to know or needs to learn in order to solve the main conflict. And because of what happens with the subplot, the main character learns something. There's a lesson, and the character learns it from the mirror subplot. Another type of subplot is a contrasting subplot. Now, in a contrasting subplot, you have another character. You have your main storyline, your main character, and you have another character, and they face the same dilemma, but in the subplot, the character makes a different choice than the main character, and they end up with different results. An example of this would be from our book Shimmer. And in Shimmer, there is a character called Francine. And Francine is sold in the marriage auction alongside Mariah, and the two of them have much different outcomes. And that's an example of a contrasting subplot. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe and help get the word out and build the channel. Make sure that you hit that bell notification so you don't miss any future videos. The next one is a complicating subplot. And it just like it sounds, in a complicating subplot, you have a secondary character who makes life more complicated for your main character. My example of this is, again, from our book Shimmer. We use a complicating subplot in this as well. And what happens is there's a character named Sapphire, and she has a history with Mariah's new husband, and that really complicates things for Mariah, and that would be an example of a complicating subplot. Another very popular subplot is the romantic subplot. And in a romantic subplot, you often have like a love triangle where the main character actually has two love interests, and it's a subplot of what's going to happen, which person is she going to choose. The key to a romantic subplot, it doesn't always have to be a love triangle, but the key is that the romantic relationship or the hint of it complicates the experience, and it complicates the whole storyline. My favorite example of a romantic subplot is from one of my favorite books, The Hunger Games, and it is the love triangle between Katniss, Peeta, and Gale. And it's what happens between the three of them, and that love triangle actually travels through all of the books. But it's not the main storyline, but it's one of the subplots. It's a romantic subplot. And if you look at that even further, you can look at how Katniss and Peeta are in the arena, and the people in the Capitol really are interested in the relationship between the two of them. And so they actually fake a romantic relationship in the arena in order to stay alive. It's a way for them to survive. And that is just a great example of a romantic subplot. So as I said, I'm going to give you tips, practical writing tips for how to create subplots in your story. Writing tip number 1 is relevance. Make sure that when you are devising and coming up with subplots for your story, that the subplots are connected to your main plot, that they add to the overall narrative arc of your story. You want to avoid adding unnecessary subplots that are not connected and that do not add to your story. If they seem unnecessary, then they're just going to be a distraction to the reader. Make sure that it's relevant. Writing tip number 2 is interconnectedness. So you have your main plot line. Make sure that your subplot interconnects, weaves in, has some time of parallel, interconnects again. You want to make sure that you have those points of connection and those points of running parallel in all of your storylines and all of your subplots. make sure that at least one character in the subplot has a connection to the main storyline. So you can have lots of things happening in a subplot as long as one character connects. That connectedness and that cohesiveness is really important with subplots. And tip number 3 is conflict and resolution. All your subplots, you can think of them as like, here's your main storyline, and then you've got your subplots, which they can be considered a story in and of themselves, but they're not a separate story. But your subplot has to have like a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the subplot should add conflict to your main storyline. When you add conflict to your main storyline, what that does is it adds tension, it adds drama, it gets the readers or viewers more drawn in because it's the subplots that really add depth. And by adding conflict, that's what adds depth. The other thing that you want to make sure of is that all of your subplots are resolved before the end of the story. Writing tip number 4 is pacing and balance. So you want to make sure that the main storyline and the subplot, that neither one overshadows the other. You want to make sure that you've got a really good balance and that your subplot doesn't outshine your main storyline, and vice versa. You can use the subplot to break up. You can use it to add spacing and to help with your pacing if you want to speed things up or slow things down. You can use your subplots strategically to do this. And tip number 5 is foreshadowing and payoff. I love foreshadowing, and you can use subplots to foreshadow and give hints to what's going to happen later on in the main storyline. This is great for building the anticipation in the reader or the viewer and getting them ready to find out what happens next. It's the foreshadowing and adding those things in that really builds this. Number 6 is emotional payoff. So you want to make sure that your subplots draw your reader in and evoke emotions within the reader, whether that's through humor or drama or suspense. Use your subplots to create that emotional response in your reader. Emotional engagement with the story is one of the key elements that really makes a story worth reading and makes it an enjoyable experience because there's an emotional engagement. Use these suggestions and ideas to add subplots to your story and write a story that engages your reader. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.